Welcome to Finding Certainty with your host and U.S. Army veteran, Patrick Laing. Over the next hour, you'll learn from Patrick and his expert guests how to attract more certainty into your business and your life. Now, here is your host, Patrick Laing.
Good morning and welcome back to Finding Certainty. If you're a new listener, welcome. If you're a returning listener, you know we love you. Happy February, I guess I should say. This is one of my favorite months. It's my birthday month, and of course, it's Valentine's, the month of love. But I'm very excited today for our special guest, Mr. Robert Mesch. And I always start out the show introducing him a little bit, or her, talking about the two main reasons I've asked this specific guest to join us here on Finding Certainty. So, Robert, thanks for being here and being in the hot seat. I really appreciate it, especially short notice as it was.
Patrick, thanks for having me. This is another great opportunity to step forward to me, so I'm really looking forward to this.
We're going to have a great conversation. We, in the episode description, if you're listening, if you had a chance to read it, you'll see that Robert has an in-depth and storied career and background. And yet he's setting out in a new direction in his life, which is what we're going to be talking about. We're talking today about the transition, or the leap, as I call it, leap of faith, or however you want to define it, but the leap from being an employee to being self-employed. And so, but let's start out with two main reasons why I've invited Robert to join us today. First and foremost, he is a consummate expert in his field. He achieved some very high levels in corporate America as a sales professional, as a trainer, as a manager, et cetera, et cetera. And so he's coming from an area of a great deal of experience and insight and business acumen and so forth. And yet, as I said, the second reason is that he is setting out in a new direction as an entrepreneur. And not the first time you've done this, Robert, but I know it's a new adventure for you. And so I know a lot of our listeners are out there. They're either in business for themselves or they're considering going into business. I think there's thousands and thousands of people starting their own businesses every day, and you're one of those. And so you're a little bit on the other end of the spectrum from many of our guests where we're talking to established business owners and influencers and so forth. But you're a good blend of an entrepreneur who has years and years of business experience. So you're kind of a rookie, but not, right? Is that a safe way to put it?
That is. And, exciting times ahead for me, as we'll share in the minutes ahead here. A lot of things happened throughout my corporate career that allowed me to take this change, or I decided to make this change and this huge step forward and leap of faith, or as I refer to it, as taking massive action. And, I'm looking forward to it. There's no doubt in my mind at all that, the path I'm taking is the right one for a lot of reasons. And it really, a big part of, our life, and how many times have we heard from people that, you have to work hard in business and you have to spend all those extra hours, but you're sacrificing things along the way. And one of the things that, I learned a little bit later than I really should have is that personal side, that life-work balance. Man, I can tell you that sparked my fire. As we're going to talk about here a little bit, my last change that really ignited the flames to me, allowing me to take and further balance that work-life balance and really put life's experiences first. I mean, it's so key in our lives. It's why we're here today, and I'm looking forward to just continuing to expand that side of my personal side of me.
Absolutely. I think it's something most entrepreneurs can resonate with. It's not always just about the money or the potential income available. A lot of the time it's about the freedom, right? The time, the quality of life, being able to work from where you want to, when you want to, et cetera, et cetera. And I think most of us would resonate. We're not just thrust into entrepreneurship. Hopefully we chose it. It was something we wanted to do. It wasn't out of necessity, but that being said, you touched on a couple of interesting points. As you've been in your career now, 30 plus years, you've reached some of the highest levels, and yet you realize that there were things lacking, right? There were things that that maybe were missing or that you longed for, and I think it's normal. That I don't think there's any perfect job. I mean, there might be, but I haven't seen it where we like some things, we don't like some things. There's things we may even hate about our career, and others that we put up with. But many times it's what we have to do, right? We're providing for our families, providing for our lives, and just trying to survive. And yet we get to a point, many of us, and many of those listening to our show, many of the entrepreneurs out there, I think we get to a point where we say, okay, I'm ready. Either enough is enough, or okay, I'm to a point in my life where I'm either comfortable enough, or I'm desperate enough, or I'm confident enough to take that leap. And it's different for every person, right? I know when I started our business, it was because I was having a hard time finding a job. Even though I had a great resume, I was getting interviewed by millennials who were half my age or less. And I think it was a turnoff to them when they saw 30 years of sales experience on my resume. And so, that was one of the reasons I decided to start my own business, because I was having a hard time finding something that was a great replacement for where I was. Also, though, I had the same dreams and the same hopes and the same desires that I think you have and many entrepreneurs do, to do something more with my life, to have more control and hopefully more income and more freedom and self-worth and everything else. So we're going to talk about that. As Robert said, it's going to be a big part of today's conversation. I think it's something many of us can relate to, whether we're currently an entrepreneur considering going into self-employment. But before we go there, let's talk a little bit about Robert. If you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about your background. Where'd you grow up, and what have you done for the last several years? Just a brief synopsis if you can, and then where are you at today?
Love to, Patrick, and so true. And you add the last element to your points about the turbulent times we're living in today. That also, kind of creates that need a little bit of, how am I going to create certainty in the turbulent times of today? So, I grew up in Chicago, small family, Midwest values of my dad were pretty much ingrained in what I do. And it has a lot to do with the name of my new venture, Integrity's Path. So I had that upbringing. My dad was very strong in what he did, and he was very dedicated. My dad was a machinist, and he had a very demanding job. He had not such a great work environment. And I remember he'd come home ready to get ready for dinner, and he'd clean up, and stuff. And one day I came home from sports practice, and he was cleaning up, getting ready for dinner, and I'll never forget it. He was in there in the sink and cleaning himself up and stuff, and he started bleeding from the nose, and it was just, part of his routine, and I never noticed it before. But in being a machinist, you inhale those shavings and that kind of stuff, right. And not once in any part of my lifetime growing up with my dad did I hear a complaint. He just took it on the chin. It was part of, day to day, and he just was extremely good at what he did. But he had that dedication. He had that personal, no matter what, I'll make it happen for my family. And that just resonates with me. He was a great man, a great part of my life. And so grew up in Chicago, Midwestern values, pretty good high school. It was one of the stronger high schools in the Chicagoland area. And I had the opportunity to play sports. And the athletics part of it and the sports side of it really ingrained in me the competition. Very competitive, bigger city. And so a lot like my dad, that instilled in me to be the best at what you do. That's not so easy in young sports. There's always somebody trying to overachieving over you and what you do. So that athletic part of my life really carried forth as I take that 10,000 foot look at my life, and certain elements of it, that the athletics really gave me that competitive spirit to really drive. And I carried that forward in a lot of the business and corporate world that I had ventures with and opportunities with. So that's a key part of it. Grew up there. And
that's fantastic. Let me just interject. I think that, we hear a lot of in the press and in different commentaries and so forth, just the value of having a father who's at home and who's engaged. And there's latchkey kids and so many children who are growing up, many of them in African-American communities and other communities that are growing up without their fathers. And it's a national crisis, right? Because having a strong father figure and a strong mother, but having that strong role model and support and example is so critical to the success of our children. And you also talked about sports, and I think a very high percentage, this isn't statistical, but just in my experience, a very high percentage of successful business owners and entrepreneurs have a background in sports. They learned that teamwork, and they learned that dedication, that effort. Anyway, so I think it makes a lot of sense why, one, you've been successful in your career, and two, I believe you'll be very successful as a business owner. So.
Thank you. Yeah, so living in Chicago and graduated high school there, I had plans on attending Northern Illinois University, and my parents actually had plans on moving to the Southwest. My dad was going to take that leap. He got offered a job out there, and I was glad he did it because it kind of gave him a new window in life, better climate, better opportunity for him. So I'll never forget the day. He had the plan set and everything, but then I get this phone call. And the moving arrangements to get him there were complicated. And so he asked me if I wouldn't mind. It was the summer before, starting at the university, and I had plans to, get up and going. But he asked me, can you help me move? Can you help me make that transition to New Mexico? So I said, sure. My dad, tremendous part of my life, he was struggling with it. So I, wanted to help, and I had the opportunity to. So I took him up on it. And I remember coming to, to New Mexico. I remember the move, getting, through all of the fun parts of move that we all laugh about later. But, I got there, and some of the things I noticed were just, hadn't been in the Southwest. I mean, trips occasionally and stuff like that for any period of time. And some of the immediate things I noticed, because at that point in time in my life, we had activities going on like the riots, and, we had a lot of activities going on the national scene. So things were a little tense in the country. And when I got to New Mexico, it was a different story. A lot of sunshine, people, diverse group of people. And in the short period of time I was here, I experienced that, of course, the great cuisine here in New Mexico and stuff. But, just the weather and the opportunity to be able to breathe that clean, fresh air. And every morning, the sunshine, as my wife refers to it, as expensive sunshine, that really grabbed me. And I was thinking in the back of my mind, what if my parents are, having a little bit of a difficult time, could come back? What if I changed my plans? What if I went from Northern Illinois University, I went to UNM in New Mexico, potentially what would, that look like and the benefits from it? And I decided to make that change. So I was attending the university and, going to the school, and that's where I really started my first part-time job while attending the university.
That's a big move from Chicago to New Mexico, not just the weather and the scenery, the beautiful country, but different population, different demographics, different mindset even. There's a different personality from a person from Chicago, from a person in New Mexico, Arizona, Southern Utah, et cetera. It's a very different communities in a real sense, in my experience.
It is. And one of the things you immediately notice is it was back then a much more relaxed environment, unlocked doors. People were more friendly. the experience and introductions were people. It was a different experience. And, as culturally diverse as it is here in New Mexico, people were still friendly back then, and they made that life part, just more enjoyable. So in that short time I was here, I experienced that, and I decided, maybe this is something that, I want to do for a while. So I made that change.
I understand that. I live in Henderson, Nevada. I've spent much of my life here in the West, and ranging from Utah to San Diego to Las Vegas, and I can completely understand that. So you went to college at UNM. What did you end up getting your degree in, and what was that first job that you started out at?
Well, that first part-time job started to be a real launching point in my life, in my career, in my life. And it was with a small business. It was an engineering and technical company, supply company, and I was part-time. But we had a great group of people. It was a fun experience, and yet it was pretty technical. I mean, we sold, some technology products there and a range of products, and we helped businesses and stuff. And I'll never forget the relationship between the owner and the next person in charge, the vice president of the organization. And he was a younger Hispanic man that was just really polished and really personable and really, somebody you could listen to and just sit back and go, wow, this guy's got it together. And so he did a lot with the business back then, ended up starting a subsidiary business that was in the Hispanic side of the business that created that Hispanic marketing arm for the company, and just really launched that business into a whole new arena, which I was asked to be part of. Here I am going to the university and, following my, my schooling and trying to better my education, but yet I got this opportunity in front of me, and it was a huge opportunity. So I took it on. They asked me to, be full-time sales, and they made it, attractive to me. And to this day, I never look back. I mean, sales has always been part of what I do. And in that process, I've just met some incredible people, had some incredible experiences, and really learned a lot that just helped me move on in my career as the next career. So I really never did finish my degree. And like a lot of us, I don't look back. I don't think it's stopped me in any way. It might have occasionally, in interviews and stuff like that, people look at that and they say, well, how come you don't have your degree? But I don't look at it that way, because it really launched a part of my life that I'll never look back on. Sales is very rewarding in a lot of many ways. And that journey you take along that sales path, it's just incredible. The people you meet, the experiences you can have, and the opportunities that are out there today to succeed in sales. It's a lot of fun. So I decided to just, keep moving on.
That's fantastic. My story is a little similar, and we're coming up on our first break here, but I was thinking about going to law school. I mean, I got my BA in English, but really didn't know what I was going to do with it, or didn't know what I thought about teaching, maybe like my mom and my grandmother and uncle, and come from a long line of educators. But during the summers, I did a sales job selling Yellow Page advertising all over the Midwest and eventually in Alaska. And I realized I was pretty good at it, and I was making good money, and let's go to our break. I'll come back. I'll tell you the rest of that story, because it transitions to where I am today. And I think it probably resonates or parallels some of your story as well, Robert. So we're visiting with Robert Mesch. He's the owner of Integrity's Path, LLC. Also a consultant with our firm, with our consulting firm, Certainty Management. Very pleased to have him on our team. But let's come back after the break, and we'll continue the conversation. It's starting to get interesting. So we're cooking with oil, as they say now. So don't go away. We will be right back.
Become our friend on Facebook. Post your thoughts about our shows and network on our timeline. Visit facebook.com/Voice America.
Certainty Management can help create more certainty in your life with our deep discount health insurance options, even for 1099s, part-time employees, volunteers, and more. Pay less to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your team. Call 888-684-3122 for a free quote today. That's 888-684-3122. Visit us on the web at certaintyteam.com. That's certainty, TEAM, like Mary.com.
Have you become a member yet? Sign up now to become a member of Voice America. It's always free and easy. Plus, you get to take advantage of some great member benefits. Get unlimited access to millions of hours of on-demand content across all of our channels. Keep track of your favorite episodes, shows, and hosts in your own customizable library. Find out what shows you might be interested in based on your favorites. Plus, you get insider access with our newsletter. Membership gives you more. Sign up at voiceamerica.com and click register at the top right.
If you're a nonprofit in need of funding, we can help. Certainty Management is a cost reduction firm that also helps churches, schools, sports teams, and other nonprofits raise unlimited zero-cost funding. Best of all, you don't have to sell anything or ask for donations. Call 888-684-3122 to learn more today. That's 888-684-3122. Visit us on the web at certaintyteam.com. That's certainty, TEAM, like Mary.com.
You're listening to Finding Certainty with Patrick Laing. Have a question for Patrick or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show with Patrick.
Welcome back, all you Finding Certainty listeners out there. And thanks for joining us. We're visiting with Robert Mesch. He's the founder and the CEO of Integrity's Path, LLC. And we're going to get into a little bit of what Integrity's Path does, Robert. Talk a little bit more about your transition from employee to self-employed. That's a big leap, frightening leap for a lot of people, but you don't seem very nervous or frightened by the concept. On the contrary, you seem pretty excited about it. So is that safe to say?
Oh, it is. You can't, I've learned over the years, you can't let anything get in the way. You know things are going to happen, as they say, and it's how you really learn to handle those things and move on and give yourself that self-commitment of, I'm not going to let anything get in the way. And it's
Absolutely.
part of that life-work balance that helps create that final outcome. And for me, that tremendous value in that life experience is very important to me, and it won't go away.
Couldn't agree more. I was saying before the break how I was headed in one direction, headed to law school. I thought of being a trial lawyer someday. I like to talk and be on stage and so forth. But during the summers, I did sales, and I'd go out and we made really good money. My wife and I both sold, and we'd make $600 a day as college kids, do that for 2 months and take a month off and come back and have the whole school year paid for. And so I came to a point where I thought, sales could be a pretty good career. It's something I'm good at. I think I'd enjoy it. There's always opportunity. I'd say, we're all in sales to one degree or another, but if you are a professional salesperson, you can always find work, right? There's always something to be had if you carry yourself well. So you made that transition. You made that decision yourself. In fact, you left college to go into sales, and a lot of people have done that. I think, why should I finish a degree? I don't think I'm going to need it. There's a lot of opportunity. Tell us a little bit about where you went from there. You started out with this technology company, and you've spent 30 years largely in the imaging contract or imaging technology arena in various roles and with various companies, right?
Yeah, I have. And that first part-time career was the start to that. And I got actually recruited by one of the companies that I was involved in that first part-time retail experience. And so I had some manufacturers representatives I had the opportunity to meet and train with and expand my career. And a short time later, it so happened that, one of them took interest, shared who I was to the management team, his management team, and thought I might be a great fit for their growing organization. So I ended up getting recruited by this conglomerate. It was a huge company. And out of the blue, I got this offer to be able to, cover a 4-state region and to do it and, work for this big company. So, the offer was a great offer. It was a great opportunity. And then I really looked at, again, New Mexico, that great sunshine. And then I looked at, Nevada, I looked at Utah and, New Mexico and the territories involved. And I can tell you, one day I can be skiing in the mountains of Utah, and the next day I can be playing golf in Arizona. I mean, it was a great opportunity. I thought, hey, I'm going to have a good experience here and I'm going to make it work. So I actually had to move from New Mexico, though. And at that point, I had just gotten married and moved from New Mexico to Arizona. They wanted to establish the office there. And a good portion of the customer base was there. It was involved in high-tech imaging, film imaging in the high-tech industry, taking circuit boards from their original design patterns, which were large, one-room, huge, printing devices, and then shrinking that process into what is the circuit board in the process. So what an experience to be able to learn from. What a great industry to be involved with, the high-tech imaging and high-tech circuit, manufacturing business. And then I also had a portion of OEM products and stuff that I worked with, like Hewlett-Packard and some big companies and stuff like that. So what a great opportunity. It really was a official launch of my career. The first part was a part-time gig, and the second one was the official launch into sales. And I really had the opportunity to also be supported by a great manager. And I cannot stress enough how that coaching, that guidance in a young person starting out their career, how important that is to be able to get that person behind you in the launch. It's a different thing, given a set of directions and say, here, do this and do this. But it's a huge difference to have that person allow you to take that step forward and then coach you. Hey, you might have been better off doing it this way, or pat you on the back and say, man, that was a home run. You did a great job. So that was that position change. And as I look back now, the company president for that organization, which happened to be headquartered in Illinois, this gentleman was just, he developed also to be a great mentor. And many years later, I had the opportunity to look him up. And you mentioned about your law, you're thinking about getting involved in the legal side of things. This gentleman was a very well distinguished and acknowledged, president of the company, worked his way all through this conglomerate. And I looked him up recently, and he's over 80 years old. He's still married to the love of his life. And he's actually now at 80 years old getting his law degree. And I thought to myself,
Great.
What an individual. What a person to be able to not stop thinking about, life, where he wants to go, what he wants to experience, but yet he has the right partners. He have, the right wife behind him, supporting him. And so I just thought that was really incredible that at 80 years old, being able to pursue his law degree.
I love that. That's awesome. My grandfather, George Tate, he's my mom's dad. Yeah, he kind of did the same thing. He went back to college in his 60s not in the 60s, probably it was in his 40s or so, but he went to college with his children. They were all headed to college. He went with them and got his degree at a later age. And, we talked about your father. As we discuss mentors, they're so important. I look back over my career and I can count on probably one hand the mentors that really stand out, but they changed me for the better. I learned things from each one of them. They taught me how to carry myself, what to do, what not to do. And it's so important. And, it's interesting because I believe as an entrepreneur, and you're experiencing this as we speak, we are constantly reinventing ourselves, whether that's going back to school, pivoting to a business or a new direction. And then even when you are an entrepreneur, you're constantly reinventing yourself and constantly reevaluating. They say an entrepreneur is the only person who will work 100 hours a week to avoid having to work 40. I heard that quote not long ago. And it's true, hopefully you don't have to work 100, but the concept is it's worth it, right? It's worth it to have to work harder, to have maybe the insecurity, lack of benefits, or whatever it is that we give up, to be our own boss and to be able to reinvent ourselves and forge our own path. Right. And so anyway, we don't need to go into too much more detail on your career, although I know you're award winning. You won President's Club with multiple companies. You actually landed a really large contract that you were responsible for with, was it Sandia National Laboratories, the JIT contract, right? Do you want to talk about that for just one quick minute? Because I think it's one of the pinnacles of your career, if I understand you.
Yeah, it certainly was. And, every time you take that change, every time you step, into something new, as you mentioned, opportunity presents itself. And it's what you do with that opportunity that truly makes that difference. And so I was working for that large conglomerate. My manager, who I worked for, who supported me and, at that time, a great mentor, decided years later to make a change in his life. His parents had a family business, again, in the imaging field. And so he decided to buy one of the dealerships for the business that he was supporting. And so naturally, he places that phone call to me now and says, hey, I'm going to be leaving the organization. And it really hit me hard because he was a great coach and great support factor there. And, I wished him well, and they replaced him and stuff. And I get a phone call, it was a couple of weeks later, and he says, putting this change together, Robert, I want to ask if you want to be involved. Do you want to come back to New Mexico? The dealership was in New Mexico. And do you want to do you want to get engaged in that? Do you want to be, vice president of sales for me and stuff? And I thought about it, and I'm thinking, I'm still at that success level with the other organization. Change, do I really want to do it? And even though he's a great mentor and stuff, I shut him down. I said, no, I just, gut feeling told me it wasn't right at the time for whatever reason. I said, I'm going to pass. Thanks for asking for the opportunity. I'm going to pass. And it so happens 2 years later, I'm at a trade show in Orlando, Florida, and there's this individual there, and he says, hey, I'm buying you drinks after the end of the session, but please be there. I said, okay, it was good to see you again. We'll get caught up, and it was great to see him. So I met him for drinks after, and, during the discussions, he said, hey, listen, I'm having a good time doing this, but I miss you being part of what I think you could help me in, and I'm asking you a second time. I'm going to sweeten the offer. I don't want you to say no, and I want you to join the company. And so at that point in time, things were a little different for me. A couple of years went by, and I thought about it, and I said, okay, why not? Change, why not? Let's do it. I had a great relationship with him. I thought it would be a great partnership. So I made the change and moved back from Arizona to New Mexico. And during that change and during that process, I was only back a couple months, and as vice president of sales, certainly you're looking for opportunities, a way to grow revenue and opportunities. And knowing the customer base there, because I had traveled there previously, Sandia Laboratories was changing the way they were conducting themselves in their purchasing operations, their inventory operations, and they went to what's referred to as a just-in-time process, where they were going to eliminate the expense of the inventory, and they were going to go into partnering with small businesses in the area and allow them to do that for them. And so this opportunity presented itself. I was only back a couple months. It was a huge, involvement of time and effort. And so I decided to interview the first just-in-time award winner for his business in this product line. And I interviewed that individual to shortcut the process, and I've learned a lot. And I went for it. I put together the materials, met with the laboratories, went to the meetings, and got pretty engaged in this process with, hey, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. Let's put together a great, presentation, a great proposal for them. And really thinking, that's probably a long shot because there's other businesses here that are longer established. They probably have some relationships. They're probably better known. But there was something in our proposal. There was something there that enticed Sandia Labs to take a further look at us, and they ended up signing the contract. And man, I can tell you, getting a $5 million contract, and with an automatic 3-year renewal, if you meet the work objectives and the delivery objectives, to be able to have that kind of contract, it's a tremendous leap. It was great for the business, weekly cash flow. And it was just a great opportunity to really, do that project and make it work. And it was a lot of fun, a lot of hard work, but it was really, it was a win-win. It was a great outcome. So I did that contract and we put it into place. And I just, as part of my career, it's one of the things that stands out to me that I can put on my resume and say, I did that.
That's a really great story, Robert. Yeah. The interesting thing as I was listening to you talk about how they redid their business model to just-in-time services. It's interesting because as we talk about reinventing ourselves, unfortunately, not always as a positive, companies are reinventing themselves and redesigning and changing how they do business. And we've got a couple of minutes until our next break, but talk about how that has affected you in your career, because I know it's affected you. We've talked about how the changes in the industry and changing to a dealer model and changing this and changing that has impacted your career in many respects, helped lead you to where you are today. So in the last 2 minutes, do you mind just addressing that? Because I think it's a pretty good transition to our break, and then we can come back and focus on what you're doing today.
Yeah, the last 3 career positions I've had, major corporate people, and in each one of those situations, I could not determine the outcome. No matter how successful I was or my team was or the group was and what we did and the successful part of that side, the outcome was not what we expected in each one of those situations. And it really began to impact the other side, that life balance of mine, where if I'm going to spend this time, if I'm going to do this stuff and be successful, how come I have to come home and tell my wife, guess what? Companies taking a different change. They're changing their path. They're changing their way of doing business. And unfortunately, I don't fit in. And in one of those examples, it affected 5,000 people in the country. So can you imagine, all of the people across the country that were affected by that change? And it all leads into, it's exciting to discuss about creating certainty. For me, that's what this is all about. So that definitely, all of those experiences led to one of my number one goals I'll never give away from is to be able to create that certainty in my life. And that's huge.
Well, I agree. I think there are many out there who resonate with that sentiment and that goal. That's why we called our show Finding Certainty. When we come back from our break, I'll tell you a little bit about how this show came about, because it goes right in line with that sentiment. And then let's talk about what you're doing today. I know you had a really neat experience recently. It was very serendipitous at the Tony Robbins conference, and we'll come right back. So thanks for listening, everybody. We're with Robert Mesch of Integrity's Path, LLC. We'll be right back.
follow us on Twitter at VoiceAmericaTRN. Get the lowdown on guests, new shows, and your favorites. That's VoiceAmericaTRN. If you're a nonprofit in need of funding, we can help. Certainty Management is a cost reduction firm that also helps churches, schools, sports teams, and other nonprofits raise unlimited zero-cost funding. Best of all, you don't have to sell anything or ask for donations. Call 888-684-3122 to learn more today. That's 888-684-3122. Visit us on the web at certaintyteam.com. That's certainty, T-E-A-M, like Mary.com.
Voice America programs are now available on your favorite connected device, including Amazon, Alexa, and Google Home. Through streams with Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, and iHeartRadio, listening to your favorite show is as easy as saying the show name followed by the word podcast.
Hey, Alexa, play Finding Your Frequency podcast.
If that doesn't work, try adding on TuneIn or on iHeartRadio or on Apple Podcasts.
Certainty Management can help create more certainty in your life with our deep discount health insurance options, even for 1099s, part-time employees, volunteers, and more. Pay less to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your team. Call 888-684-3122 for a free quote today. That's 888-684-3122. Visit us on the web at certaintyteam.com. That's certainty, T-E-A-M, like Mary.com. You're listening to Finding Certainty with Patrick Laing. Have a question for Patrick or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show with Patrick.
Welcome back, everyone. We're visiting with Robert Mesch of Integrity's Path, LLC. And I've got to interject real quick that Robert is actually a recent addition and an extension of our consulting team here at Certainty Management. I want to share a little bit about your LLC and what you're doing, why you're here. But I will say this. We've been after this guy for over a year. Recruiting him, headhunting him, I guess you could say, and trying to convince him that he should take a close look at our company. Fortunately, he has a long relationship with our director of sales, Victoria Foster, and the timing was right, and the elements have combined that we are now in business together. So we're very pleased to have you as an extended member of the Certainty family, Robert. But let's talk about the transition. You know, we could go on and on about your career. Unfortunately, we don't have more time. It's always amazing to me how fast the hour flies by here on the show. But you decided to make the leap. So tell us why you did. And I want to hear a little bit some of the insights from the conference you attended recently with Tony Robbins, because I know it was very serendipitous with how you're feeling and what you're doing, and then maybe why you're here at Certainty. And so, why did you make the leap? Why are you here with Certainty? And maybe we'll close with some Tony Robbins thoughts.
Yeah, there's a need out there today in the business world. And, you know, integrity has always been a strong part of my life, and it flows right into the company name and the presentation, the initial presentation that I can share with people. And what I found out over the years is, you know, we've had tidal waves, we've had COVID, we've had 9/11, we've had things that have really taken impact to what, you know, businesses, economies, et cetera. And so when you look at what is the real opportunity, where can you help people, where can you make an impact, it's in a couple key areas, and it's helping people accelerate change in their business. Sales is a big part of it. It's been my entire life. My experience with that is people tend to dabble in sales. You can't dabble in it. You got to have good people. You got to give them the right tools, the right coaching, and the right things to help them, you know, create themselves and be successful and really believe in your company. And then today, marketing, branding, creating that identity, that is so key. I'll talk a little bit about that in what I learned in the Robbins seminar about identity, about self-identity in business. And then a big part of this is leading itself into what you all do at Certainty Management, and it's the cost management side. It's been in my experience that businesses really think about, I can increase revenue. It's going to help us. Unless they take that real strong cost management approach, you can raise revenue all day long, but if you're not constantly adjusting your costs, you're fighting that ongoing battle. And a lot of times businesses lose in that because they're not, those costs get out of adjustment. Just look what happened with logistics in the time during COVID and post-COVID, what's happened there. So people are taking a different approach there. And then, the benefits part of it. And how important are benefits to people, how important it is to stay healthy and have that foundation part of it. So that's what Integrity's Path is all about. It's a consulting firm targeted in some key specific areas for businesses where I know I can help improve businesses and people in that process as well. And it resonates, and it has a pretty good initial impact if it's discussed properly, the impact's discussed, and you create that emotional intensity in that person.
Well, your whole career, the mentors you've had, your father, et cetera, have led you to today. And I think that your choice of name is just spectacular. Your entire career has been built on integrity. That's who you are. I know that. I've heard your reputation precedes you, if I may. But it is a path, right? It's a journey. Whether it's a business or in our individual lives, we're seeking success. We're seeking that quality of life that you refer to. It's not an event. It's not an event or destination. It is absolutely a path, a pathway. And so, with Certainty Management, as you know, we're a profit consulting firm, but we also use the mantra "profit with purpose." It's really important to us to do more than just make income, but also make a difference. And I think your business, your name itself, but I know who you are and what you stand for, what you're doing resonates with that concept. So what made you make the leap to working with Certainty Management, if you don't mind me asking?
It was your message. It was what you're doing with your business that just blends so well with what I want to do with Integrity's Path. And one of the things I learned, somebody else has already created, part of that. Partnering and collaboration today is huge in business success. And so, I reached out to you all, happened to, from a former business side of things, know Victoria, and she knew who I was, to an extent. But when I had that first conversation with you, it just felt right. And then I did some further research. I looked at what and how you do things, and I said, I really need them in a partner in this new venture I have. They're really the two can come together. They can help me and I can help them to a certain extent. And it really is going to be a great partnership. And I am all guns ahead. I'm ready to move forward.
Well, we couldn't be more pleased to have you as part of our team. We're a pretty tight-knit family, and we're very selective about who we bring in. You'll see, you're starting to see this already, but it's the quality of our team. So, that being said, I know just before we end this and maybe share some Tony Robbins insights, you have done several things in your career that have contributed to your success and that will contribute to your ongoing success. But I know one of those, if you can take maybe 60 seconds and address it, has been how well organized you are in your efforts. They're not a shotgun approach. It's a sniper approach. It's very calculated, very organized. You talked a little bit with me yesterday about your CRM background. And do you mind just addressing that? Because I think it might be something that would appeal to the listeners.
Well, using tools to your advantage, using technology to your advantage, it's out there. And with the right research and with the right, start using those tools in the right way. Years ago, I wish I had a lot of these tools because I think I could have even taken further steps along the line. But looking ahead, I mean, I really use that, having great time management skills. It goes back to having that, that good balance, having that time for the family. So the more I, create that great balance and that time management skill, it gives me, opportunities to use my time better at what I do. And, I learned part of that as well in that Tony Robbins part. There's a couple other key things there, but, that time management portion, using those tools correctly, and, you have a lot of resources available to you. Research them and take advantage of them.
Well, it's an interesting point, because lately there's an enormous buzz around different AI platforms and chats. And I don't know if you've heard of a Chat GPT, but something I've been learning more about and planning to share with our team in our next team meeting. In fact, I'm going to a conference tomorrow all about Chat GPT and the research capabilities of it. You can type in, virtually anything, and it spits out an answer. You can ask it to write something for you. You can ask it to research. I'll give you a funny example. I have some trout in the fridge that my son and I caught last fall up in Utah, and I haven't cooked it yet because I don't know quite what to do with it, right? And so I typed into Chat GPT. I said, give me 20 recipe ideas, including the ingredients, the shopping list, and the instructions for what I could do with the trout in my fridge. And literally in about 10 seconds, it spit out 20 recipes. And so, speaking of time savings and organization and quality of life, anything we can do to save time and be more productive is good in my book. But I'm just going to give a shout out. I wish I'm not an affiliate. I don't get any royalties. I wish I did. It came out in November. It's valued at over $29 billion already. But I highly recommend anyone out there check out ChatGPT. Okay, so let's talk about your experiences last week. You spent almost a whole week listening to Mr. Tony Robbins. And I'm curious to hear both some of what you learned, but also your feelings concerning it, because I know it was very serendipitous. You feel like it was very timely with what you're doing.
Oh, it was. And what an incredible individual that experienced a lot of things as late in life as 17 years old, turn his life around and be worth, billions today. And even more importantly than that, what he contributes to charitable organizations and his contributions and his, what he's doing today for that work-life balance. It's just incredible individual. I learned quite a few key things, but taking massive action is one of them. We have a tendency to want to plan, and then, then I'll take that step forward. And he's totally about the opposite. Take that massive action, take that step forward, and then guess what? Things will fall in place. You've got that passion, you've got that knowledge about what you do. Things will fall in place. So that's a huge part of it. Creating identity, marketing, branding. I know we used AI in some of what I did on some positions, and I've had some experience with AI as well. It truly technology today, great technology. But I think out of them all, the last one, invest in yourself, is you have to do it. You have to, as you say, reinvent yourself. You have to invest in yourself, and you have to create a sense of, wow, I'm going to do that. And how am I going to get there? And instead of worrying about it, blend that faith part of, what you're all about, that personal part of what you're all about. Don't ever lose that part. And that's key part of my integrity and my faith and my family. And it all has to deal with the outcome. So when you invest in yourself, you're assured that you're going to have that greater outcome. And I've seen it in examples. I've seen a university do it when during times of COVID, they had to shift their entire program and their outcome and what they did in an international level for this course of students, and their outcome was key. And so, but it all had to do with communications, investment, and what you can do personally to make a difference. So invest in yourself, continually reinvest in yourself, continue to grow. and you'll be on your way to that happy balance between life and, most importantly, creating certainty in your life. I tell you, all during those changes, through all that corporate stuff, I'll never forget those times when I had to, on the drive home, think, okay, how am I going to explain this one? Successful, making some money, but yet, guess what? We're going to have a change. And to me, I don't want to do that ever again. I want to be able to set my path, know my future, create that future, and really have people, look at it and say, wow, well done.
I love that sentiment. It's just, and like you said, Robert, it all starts with starting, right? Just like Tony Robbins says, massive action, and don't overanalyze. Many of us get caught in analysis paralysis, as they say. And I've seen it many times. I've been a sales trainer for many, many years, salespeople who they want to learn the script perfectly. They want to learn everything about the product. And yet the one who just picks up the phones and says, I don't know everything, but I'm just going to start calling, or I'm going to start calling on customers. They're the ones who lead the pack. And so we are out of time, but I've really enjoyed the conversation. You're going to be wildly successful. I know you're not just because you're working with us, but because of who you are and what you've done and where you're headed. It's so much of success comes down to principles, and your entire life and your business are founded in enduring principles, I believe. So I wish you the very best, my friend. We'll be here to support you and cheer you on and contribute however we can. We're looking forward to the journey together. And thanks for being here on Finding Certainty.
Thanks, Patrick. It's been a great time. Love doing it.
Our supreme pleasure. If you'd like to learn more about Finding Certainty, please text the word certainty to 26786. You can visit us on the web at certaintylive.com or visit our company website at certaintyteam.com. I'd like to get to know Robert Mesch more. How can they get a hold of you, Robert?
Yeah, they can reach out to rmesh at certaintyteam.com. And that's from, electronic standpoint, how to do it, and just reach out, and I'd be glad to share, help anybody in which way I can. So thanks again, Patrick, and best of day to you, and look forward to moving forward here.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of Finding Certainty. We hope you've gained some more insight into how to create more certainty in your own business or nonprofit. Join us next week for another taste of the Certainty Experience. Until then, we wish you greater certainty in all that you do.